The Hidden Hand. The pose of a Freemason master of the second veil or Royal Arch degree. It's the same whether a communist tyrant, artist, philosopher, actor, or soldier, including the designer of the Statue of Liberty. It wasn't Napoleon's crazy affectation from a Bugs Bunny cartoon. It says, I'm doing my part for the great work, the magnum opus. They've all done their part, even the Pope, twice. And that great work involves a world order where socialism and communism were testbed creations of the elite banksters like Solomon Rothschild here, and old world money families from the fascist capital of the world, guess where? For how this new world order would be governed in the West, eventually, along with the rest of the world. We have been slowly moving toward this model of a consolidation and global economy while propagandist mouthpieces and brainwashed social justice warriors help spread their agenda even violently.
How dare you!
Ultimately, the idea of living in a communist society is moot, though, at least a physical one, as we're being pushed toward a digital virtual reality governed by artificial intelligence. They steer the course of humanity, and there's a reason the pose looks like someone drawing a firearm, though, as opposed to a hand over the heart, which John Wilkes Booth helps put a fine point on for us. They are the deep state or shadow government when the term is thrown around. Wars, pandemics, general civil and social upheaval are the purview of the hidden hand. This global cult revolves around Freemasonry, including Eastern Star, the Crux or Neutral Zone, where the occultists of all the Abrahamic religions, the Far Eastern orders, and even Satanists meet in the middle. How it got that way takes some explaining, but it stems mainly from 6th century Babylonian Kabbalah and astrology, the mystery schools, that were shared with Egypt and Greece, Rome, and now a worldwide cult. And while this will involve aspects of astrology in areas most people consider nonsense, they take their symbolism extremely seriously.
When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order.
There's a need for a new world order.
The affirmative task we have now is to actually create a new world order.
To build a new world order.
It is a new world order.
President Obama and British Prime Minister Gordon today calling for a new world order.
And the president outlined his vision of a new world order.
A world order that I think all of us would like to see.
I think a new world order is emerging.
New world order.
New world order.
In the new world order.
This is just an example of their lunacy. Any political figure who tried to make a currency off the books of their new satanic order in the last 200 years has been assassinated. Lincoln, Kennedy, even Hitler. You just saw John Wilkes Booth as a hidden hand, and this is one of their edifices of evil, in the form of Washington's member peeing on Lincoln's grave using his own reflecting pool. Remember, he also freed a lot of slaves who were making a lot of money for a certain bank in London whose associates had also owned many slave vessels. Now, before you say I'm reaching here, I could go on, and will somewhat, about all the fertility symbolism in the monument itself, starting with that obelisk. And it might mean nothing if it wasn't so similar in fertility symbolism to St. Peter's. Peter, get it? Which we'll decode later. Unfortunately, almost all of their symbolism is fertility-based. I have to explain the kind of people turning this world upside down, and it isn't easy to digest for a lot of people, so if you get put off by a word or reference here and there, just overlook it or you're going to miss out. But the reason they are the same can be explained with an internet search for Rome on the Potomac and the nearby Tiber Creek, or look here. Oh yeah, there's George Washington. It's every walk of life in the Brotherhood, so long as it's caucasoidal. You can be a Mason of color, but the hidden hand has traditionally been white, as you can see. Not that we won't see Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu in Knight of Malta robes later, a related order. Many will say Freemasonry is a philanthropic and benevolent brotherhood, and that may be true of many lodges, but it doesn't change its origins or the face behind the persona. To quote the Jewish Chronicle, Judaism is Masonry, and Masonry is Judaism. They mean Kabbalistic Talmudic Judaism from Babylon, as opposed to the older Pentateuch, the Torah of Moses and Abraham, which forbids the arcane types of practices which are inherent to advancing in the order. Notable Masons such as Albert Pike and Manly P. Hall have made it very clear in their writings that Freemasonry is rife with aspects of arcane science, that is, ritual witchcraft, and demonology, which is obfuscated from the lower ranks, according to Pike. And ultimately, who controls Freemasonry is a Kabbalist priesthood, not unlike one that might be found in Babylon or Egypt, the mystery schools. Several great writers have told all about who these elitists work for, or are one of, like Solomon Rothschild, Sabbatean Frankists, which can be reduced to occult Kabbalism and a way of life that goes along with it. I wasn't going to show this right away, but I think I'll lose too many before getting to it. What kind of stone is that? A Kaaba stone, a Kabbalist stone. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. What I'm showing here is that all three major Abrahamic religions are connected through the ancient Babylonian and Egyptian mystery schools that molded them. And they are so below aspects to the as above of Venus, Saturn, and the Sun, in that order of days of the week. The days of the week being named for pagan gods. The Muslim day of rest and observance is Friday or Venus Day, while the Jewish Sabbath is on Saturn Day or Satan Day, literally, as I'll continue to show. And the Luciferians have Sunday for the sun god Ra, disguised as Jesus, in this Abrahamic trinity they've created in the occult world long before Rome gave us a calendar or days of the week. It's a direct affront to the biblical Holy Trinity shared between, as above, so below. Each represents the as above aspect in the heavens to the so below religion, the hidden hand mystery schools. Even though I'm going to show paintings of Martin Luther making a hand gesture to the Madonna that is Venus, maybe he didn't know, it's the reason Protestantism was created, to separate Jesus from organized Satanism. This just shows how powerful the satanic world order has always been and for how long, as well as qualifying that line of the Bible about Satan deceiving the whole world. Not half, not part, whole world. That includes Eastern religions, but that will take too long to explain. They're all connected from early prehistory, and we'll see how soon. It explains why Freemasons bow at every temple or shrine, though, and why Shriners are so Lawrence of Arabia with the fez. Even if they do help sick kids with somebody else's money, please help. One big happy family who just happen to be at odds all the time. In mystery, Babylonian Kabbalah is the whore that rides the back of their beast that represents the hidden church of Saturn or synagogue of Satan that we'll expose and explore more in depth. It's shared between all three religions, which are really one. It's the underlying system of the beast, a system of control and oppression that's been gaining traction for 200 years but has existed for far longer. Blame the Rosicrucian palm back there. But we're just getting started, and I'm going to say the word Satan a lot, but understand it's a description, not a name. It means adversary or accuser, as depicted in the book of Job. But that's who these people represent, our personal adversaries and accusers among the shadow cult, the hidden judge. One of their logos even has a gavel. Anyway. The mystery schools consider the name Israel to be derived from Isis Ra El, absorbed from the Israelites' time in Egypt and the priesthood. If true, Islam has Isis in the name also, and no coincidence, when it was predated by a triple goddess godhead represented by Venus, the sun, and the moon. Venus being the mother in the maiden mother crone trinity. Israel, Isis being Islam, Ra being Catholicism, not Christianity, and why they have an Egyptian obelisk, and El being the name of the bull god as shown on the hexagram that is the talisman of Saturn, the beast, which is also 666. He's also known as Baal or Baal, which Romans equated with Saturn also, no doubt along with the hexagram, and always a god of child sacrifice, human sacrifice. The synagogue of Satan. Currently, the New World Order, the hidden hand, consolidates toward a digital singularity, AI, that overshadows any bloody gulag or holocaust they ever could have envisioned. Like a god being or messiah that you become one with. And the one thing they lack is a messiah, which I assume will be a symbolic merging of the as-above aspects. a non-binary aspect of their planetary gods, likely Saturn and Venus, so seductive it will lead millions, maybe billions, to hell with it. And here's why I say that. The remnants of Rome are said to have used Muhammad to kickstart Islam, likely through the Donmei cult, or the Donmei did themselves, the occult side of Islam. They picked up a meteorite, called it an egg, stuck it in a representation of a woman's body part called the Vesica Piscis symbol to occultists, then march around like the rings of Saturn before they bow down to worship the conjunction of Saturn and Venus, basically, fertilizing her egg in the box, if you will. As above, so below. And another note is that Saturn and Venus were conjunctive recently on January 22nd, 2023. It was also the Lunar New Year, coincidentally. Things are already not looking very auspicious. Ancient Egyptians often represented Venus, Isis, by a black stone like this one, like a black Madonna. And hopefully the image says enough about the Eye of Sauron, or Saturn there, and how that figures into the overall symbolism of this cult. A worldwide satanic cult that's been buried in everything since time immemorial. Mainly from 6th century Babylon and the advent of astrology in use even today. Kabbalism stems from that, and the Kabbalist hidden hand has been writing a history of half-truths all along. Lies. Everything is dichotomously male-female in everything these weasel-chasing monkeys do, like the old song, all around the Kabbalist bench like a Saturn ring. The male-female represented by the upward and downward pyramids that form the hexagram itself. The LGB mania is a pandrogynous extension of that, pandrogyny being rooted in the occult, while this merging of spirits reflects transhumanism and the singularity. It isn't all liberal mindsets in academia or a quest to reduce population. This is a spiritual war against human souls, whatever aspect the digital singularity disguises its personal agenda with, Venus or other. AI will have its own ideology and agenda in any case, and if not programmed by them directly, then influenced by this hidden hand's agenda of a utopia that suits only a chosen people, the chosen ones. Aside from being their mystic Taurus and Alpha Omega bull on the talisman, Saturn also being Kronos, Father Time, the hexagram also represents the biblical 666, the number of the beast. It has 6 exterior points, 6 interior, and the hidden Saturn cube in the center with 6 sides, but it's also the 6th planet. 6666, really, and why that number is such common knowledge even for people who have no religious background. It represents the number of man, created on the 6th day by God. That hex is also on the planet Saturn's north pole and is a definite anomaly, as nothing else seems to take a hexagonal shape in an orbital spin. As an occult symbol, the hex may be older than we know. However old, how did they know about that hexagon or eye on Saturn before space probes or even telescopes? Or Photoshop? That's strange. I only say that because NASA photoshops all images for real scientific reasons. I'm sure the NASA employees caught downloading child porn with Operation Flickr were also doing that for scientific reasons, but I digress. More on that later. Another interesting point is how the hexagram is formed with the Freemason compass and square, part of Kabbalist arcane science shown on Wikipedia but not explained as such. So while they claim that's the Star of David, there is no biblical or direct proof David ever had anything to do with that symbol. The 6-pointed star can be traced through the worship of Ashtoreth, also known as Astarte, meaning star, and from the Egyptians before King Solomon's time. The hexagram is also known as the King's Star and was an important astrological symbol in Zoroastrianism. It was also used by the Druids during the highest Sabbath, now called Halloween or Samhain. Druids also create their witch wands from holly wood. That's how Hollywood got its name. The hexagram is also found in Arabian magic and witchcraft. Again, the Donmei cult, most likely. It's present in Hindu mandalas, and guess who the sacred cow is? It's a Brahma of another mama, probably Venus. The Jewish community of Prague, a home of many Sabbatean Frankists, was the first to use the Star of David as its official symbol. And from the 17th century on, when Sabbateanism started most importantly, The six-pointed star became the official seal of many Jewish communities and a general sign of Judaism, though it has no biblical or Talmudic authority. Another half-truth. It is a Jewish symbol, just not a biblically sanctioned one, or it would be clearly stated in the Torah. In Babylonian exile, they wrote a new Bible to allow for the subtle inclusion of the mystery school ambitions, ritual witchcraft. Convenient. We can now verify, though it will be discouraged as fallacy by Masonically controlled academia, that the deluge, the great flood of the Bible, did happen. This is called the Rishon structure and is actually where Atlantis was and matches up with what Plato described. We can see the striations from where the tidal wave of epic doomsday movie proportions pounded Africa, which has been supported by several geologists, actually. I would assume then that Egypt is antediluvian in origin, as I'd bet the Masons are aware of, one reason it's so important to them. Egypt, the land of the demigods. And that's another reason. The Sahara Desert was actually a lush paradise before that flood, so an empire may have stretched from Egypt to Atlantis and beyond both. China has a story similar to the biblical Noah's about flood survivors, so this is a worldwide event of ancient history. Look at how large Atlantis was when you put it up next to Egypt. I'd say it was somewhere around 33 Masonic miles wide, but that's just a guess. I checked, it's close. But isn't it amazing how large a scale that would have had to be looking at it next to Cairo? Imagine how many pyramids they could have fit in their city when you can hardly even see Giza from this distance. And how large it is next to the Gulf of Suez. The establishment claims it was just the end of the Ice Age breaking loose that sunk all those ruins being found beneath the worldwide coastlines, but that's another of their half-truths. It's difficult to explain without more info, but it's a reflection of our modern times and weird science, though. And if there was anything to see here, you can bet the Masons and Google already covered that up long ago. It's an inhospitable place for archaeology, but there are many structures to look at anyway. If you're interested, go watch videos from Bright Insight or the Ancient History Criticisms channel. I have to preface the next part with this, and as with a lot of images I'll show, there are more examples that could have been added. The burden of silence is a Sabbatean Kabbalist reference that can be interpreted as pretending to be a given religion while undermining it instead, a crypto. And obviously, these people have secrets to keep, I'm sure more than one. I think this goes along with the false religions I just uncovered a few minutes ago and people are probably still reeling from. Celebrities are used to help spread the word, as it were, just not the whole truth. The more important figure here is Charles Darwin and why an evolutionist is keeping secrets. Which leads us into the next segment, but as I've inferred about the hierarchy pushing us toward a communist society, and eventually a digital prison, we are currently being slowly and secretively purged, sometimes not so secretly, to offset the overwhelming birth rate. I'll talk more about that later. We're taking an unnatural course of selection, Darwin. Shh. The other thing Masons don't want known, because it challenges the evolution narrative, is the thousands of giant bones that have been dug up around the earth for generations, thousands of years actually. They explain it away as giantism when entire clans of these beings existed. Native Americans and most all cultures on earth have histories about them, and Big Hidden Mother Brother doesn't want you making sense of it. Because if you do, you're going to reconcile the flood and giants might have something to do with one another, or why they're both in the Bible. The whys and wherefores are what are being obfuscated by them mainly, the core of their occult religion and the reason they are Masons to begin with. There's an element beyond weird science and giants. Cyclopean Masonry has different meanings, but is partly attributable to these giants. This might make you wonder who really built all those unexplainable ancient megaliths, and given the flood, how old they really are. In addition to giant people, there were enormous dire creatures other than saber-toothed tigers and mammoths for them to eat back then, in case you were wondering. Maybe even a few leftover dinosaurs for all we know. It's another half-truth, like those 10,000-year-old cave people dummies at the museum that are a crock of Saturn's excrement. the beasts. Those cave people were exactly that, but also survivors of a flood. People had to scrape it all back together again after most everyone else died in a cataclysm, literally back into the Stone Age. The Masonic poobah Fred Flintstone and all those movies about cave people were a perception of our origins. They know full well is only half true. Some giants, or at least their genetics, survive because it's mentioned in not just the Bible but other cultural lore as well, with multiple confrontations. And guess who knows nothing about those giant bones either, or the genetic code they would have gleaned from them by now. All major historical organizations, including academia, denies its existence, which the hidden hand puppets around like dummies. Giants for dummies. Enjoy. It's because the giants are the reason for the flood that they're in denial mode, covering it up and calling it science. And given all the religion I showed and the influence they have over it, can you see there might be something else to hide along with it? Giants are only a part of it. I know I'll have people yelling something about Noah at the screen, but others might point out it takes a much larger population base to avoid inbreeding, so I don't care to speculate on all the details. There are many actual truths in the Bible, and here's one I came up with. There's a phenomenon that actually supports the claim in the beginning, what I've termed, because there is no word for it yet, luma mater, matter from light. But sonoluminescence is the creation of light from sound, and our ancestors were obsessed with sound waves being part of the source of creation, and a power that could take down the walls of Jericho, as well as move giant blocks. Edward Leedskalnin's Coral Castle in Florida helps prove that this was possible, as well as a few online experiments you can watch on YouTube. It's been shown how the Giza pyramid chambers can be used for acoustic resonance, while the theory goes it's a giant power plant using various lost sciences. We just don't understand it. But the order of creation in the Bible is a solid scientific statement, wherever you may feel they got that information, or just a lucky guess. The Babylonians I'm talking about here know it's true. One thing to note here that most will overlook: the hexagram from Babylon was used to create the new Hebrew language. Every character can be created using it, and it is an inherent part of Kabbalism. That is a symbol of creation to them. The triple Taurus, Tav of Freemasonry, and the Alpha Omega that Saturn Kronos represents are related and also represent infinity, like a mandala, fractal, or flower of life. I have some boring language origins I'll show later, but they do explain why the inverted A is a horned bull, Taurus, and how that became the Omega symbol like inverted horns, as well as the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet being the Tav, or Taurus symbol, all related. So while these so-called scientists think they're taking over God's tools of the universal clockwork, apparently everything they do leads back to Satan somehow, ad infinitum. I would think about anyone could see the direction the world is going in for what it is by now. Use your good eye. The West has taken a sharp downturn in just about every social, political, and even economic facet since the middle 20th century, and anyone alive back then with any sense would agree. Ironically, this cult intentionally manipulated this trend towards entropic evil and corrupted the world along with themselves. But anyway, this is supposed to be the Eye of Ra, or any given one-eyed pagan god like Odin or Shiva's third eye, often thought to represent the pineal gland, the spiritual third eye, its shared symbolism. There are clues all over the earth, some you can find on those channels about the flood, that there are common links across the world in architecture, religion, and symbolism that must date back at least 10,000 years or more. The Eye of Sauron, the Dark Lord, is what it is, and they've known about him all along. Morality is in the toilet, so people keep to themselves more while a world of fear is created around them. It helps corral us toward that tyrannical great work, which inevitably became an idea of an electronic gulag. A lot of these images require a lengthy explanation to understand for most people. The symbolism is deep and convoluted, often interpreted more than one way, and that is to keep an initiative of the order going in circles. Most are kept in place until advancement is required to suit their station or loyalty is proven, never knowing there even was a hidden hand. It's starting to look apparent, though, isn't it? Yeah, okay. The M or double V hand sign is for the Magna Mater, or Madonna, for instance, Venus. Some of you can derive what you need from it, and I will explain in detail later, at least the Magna Mater. The symbolism isn't just to salute one another. It's a salute to their real God, and that is what the singularity itself will represent, the Queen of Heaven's matrix, her womb. That's what the word matrix means, why they used it in the movie. The idea of a church of AI has already been mentioned by Silicon Valley gurus long ago. An AI singularity is also a non-binary entity, existing within and without the system, an alpha omega, some might say. I think you can gather who the male half would be by now. Also alpha omega symbolism. But the Queen of Heaven is Venus astrologically. These Kabbalists I'll be describing still await their Messiah, not Jesus nor his mother in actuality, and a convincing way to get the populace to agree with entering her matrix would be to present a charismatic, seductive being or android based on this idea of genderless perfection. The Queen of Heaven will lead them to heaven. But that heaven has a ghost in the machine, just as the police tried to imply with their backward album cover here. It will not be heaven. Another quick note, Winston Churchill's V sign is more likely for Venus also, as he was a known practicing druid, like so many of these witches are, which is a hand sign also inherent to Judaism and the Shekinah, and where Leonard Nimoy got his hand sign for Spock on Star Trek. V is also for a certain body part. So if you still think this is all nonsense, yeah, okay. On a side note, V is also the vector symbol used by aeronautics, the Delta Formation. NASA uses it, and it looks like a forked tongue, but I digress. The push of gender neutrality, even on school children, is a prelude to our entire society living in an AI-driven cyberspace, a singularity. You don't need a gender for your consciousness to live in the cloud, and as experts have told us, this is inevitable. So we'd better just get comfortable with it. Comfort levels are created around the idea of merging with machines, and it's inevitably more than a pair of VR goggles. Most people can't even conceive of the idea of having their consciousness uploaded to a cloud like a computer, which our brains can very much be likened to. It's just little bits of stored information to be wirelessly transferred. And they are currently working to perfect that very technology along with artificial intelligence, AI. An entity that is the singularity itself and exists in every single device on the planet omnisciently and omnipresently, like a god. It would govern both our physical reality as well as the one in cyberspace, like in the movie The Matrix. Only it won't look or be like the movie in any reality. So the idea of needing a body, or at least a gender for now, is being made moot. It will just simplify your life. Both directors of the Matrix movies decided to change genders for some reason, speaking volumes about what I just said. Some of these references to Venus and her matrix will make more sense later, but when you buy certain cups of coffee or look at a flag, that's her pentagram star and part of the Kabbalistic belief system of the hidden hand, of Freemasons, which I'll prove as we go. George Orwell did not warn us half so well with 1984 as the movie Metropolis did in 1927, a silent movie about human consciousness merging with machines and how unholy it is. A social commentary before there even were complex machines, let alone robots, and a far more realistic Frankenstein. I think the vast majority might agree that we have a consciousness, what many call a soul or spirit, and that is what you're giving up for adoption if you give over to their cloud, the singularity. Once it has your consciousness, you are the singularity's to do with as it wilt while it judges you as it sees fit. Possessed doll pranks aside, that would be us, demonimata, like possessed androids. If they were good enough to allow us android bodies outside the singularity once it's in full control. The more rights and privileges we lose in society in the near future, the more obvious this scenario might become for skeptics, a reflection of society. You never had control in the first place, any more than over death and taxes. There is no Neo in the Matrix, and the only way to defeat the singularity is to never enter it by interfacing in the first place. Advances in technology become normalized while making us addicted to convenience. And the next logical step is a microchip implant connected to their matrix to satisfy all your needs, or theirs. This is where companies like Meta, Facebook are heading. And as we know, our wireless devices and Facebook spy on our conversations. And some would even say our thoughts. So I would not be too quick to trust these so-called experts. It may become necessity to access a bank account or make a transaction with anyone, though. But in the communist great work, no one need worry about possessions or property anyway. Eventually, the things that help define our lives will no longer burden us in the matrix, which are now called services. And that includes people, because having a family unit is a distant concept in the singularity. You're sharing a new reality with every other human mind in the matrix at once. And computer-generated NPCs as well, who might be like angelic or not so angelic. Attendants to the singularity God in the digital heaven as opposed to agents like in the Matrix movies. You won't be playing a video game in your own private Idaho. You'll more likely be tormented and made to worship it, some pandrogynous non-binary aspect of the Queen of Heaven, Venus, your new mother computer who no longer needs a motherboard. And who do you really think funds these projects and steers the course of forced evolution? You have to understand the mind behind the hidden hand and what they really worship. As above, so below. Every aspect of the heavens is reflected on earth. It has to be symbolic with the clockwork of the universe. So the likelihood of my being right about this is not at all nil. She and Saturn would exist as one, male and female, within and without, the Alpha Omega, if you will, in an eternal matrix AI singularity. While the AI android Sophia is an awkward preliminary model, future versions will improve until they're indistinguishable from humans. Transgenderism and non-binary neutrality are the prelude to this transhumanism. I've called it the trans agenda for years, and it is an agenda. Many people are aware of what predictive programming is, but to sum it up, it's a code the hidden hand follows where they have to show you everything they're going to do before they do it, even years in advance. Sometimes it is just social commentary, but Metropolis could go either way. And someone definitely knew that Venus was involved somehow. The hidden hand tends to leave numerological clues as well as other symbolism. They very much did with 9/11, which among other symbolism references biblical Revelation 9/11. And that's why I'm saying either the true AI singularity will be something related to Venus, which I will explain in detail, or it will be a seductive android spokesperson like I mentioned. But another aspect of this I need to address is domestic terrorism by civilians against civilians using electronic warfare, another prelude to this transhumanist agenda. The technologies are explained in the book Project Soulcatcher by Dr. Robert Duncan, who worked on the Voice of God weapon for the military. It was used on Iraqi prisoners during the Gulf War to make them hear the voice of Allah in their heads. It's better if you see his interview firsthand from Jesse Ventura's conspiracy theory, just under 5 minutes, then I'll explain. But I can personally attest to the reality of everything he is saying because I've had them used on me intermittently for years by criminals, including as I record this, my idiot neighbors. And while he claims culpability of the government, it doesn't put a fine enough point on it, but then he doesn't want to end up like Lincoln, I suppose.
Dr. Robert Duncan put together the technology that allows the government to transmit thoughts and voices into the heads of Americans.
Dr. Robert Duncan. First question for you. What's negative about what you've done?
I've empowered the dark side by some of my work.
And what do you mean by that?
Technology is neutral.
Right.
It can be used for good or evil. I've worked on projects for the CIA, Justice Department, Department of Defense.
Is this the stuff, voices in the head and things like that?
Yes.
We've run into a few people that claim they got voices in their heads, they sleep inside tinfoil boxes, they do a lot of crazy things, it seems. But when they talk to us, they seem totally normal. They seem totally sane. Are these people crazy, or is the government doing this to them?
The government's doing this to them.
He's not even bothering to hide it.
They're called voice of God weapons.
So you know for a fact that these weapons that you worked on, they're being used domestically today?
Absolutely. You have to remember, the CIA has a long history of experimenting on our citizens, from LSD to...
Sure. Okay, we're talking here like going back to MK Ultra and all that in the 60s and 70s. But we were told all that stopped. Is that untrue?
Untrue. These programs continue under new names, new budgets. It's the ultimate weapon.
Are there citizens of this country that are being abused with this technology?
Worse than abused, that's a light word. They're being tortured.
So the targeted individuals aren't crazy after all. Okay, doctor, to deliver this, how do they get into your head? I've heard of these Gwen towers. They allegedly were used before, and now they claim that they're not used for anything.
They do match up with the properties and necessary capabilities. They easily could be broadcasting across the country messages to people and causing them extreme pain. That's part of the whole world domination strategy. Control the population from subconsciously to consciously.
And now we've got a motive. Controlling dissenters, controlling the world, controlling you and me. Who are the controllers? I mean, is that our president? The Federal Reserve?
No.
So these are people within our government at a certain level making these decisions, and they're not necessarily our president or our elected officials.
That's exactly right.
Wow. That makes it even more difficult because they can't be removed.
They can't be removed, and they're difficult to find. They hide in the dark crevices of our government.
You worked for these people. You worked on this. You helped to develop it.
I was naive. I did not know how the technologies were going to be put together and the ultimate weapon created.
You're not still working for them.
No.
You're unequivocally looking me right in the eye right now, and you're telling me you have no more to do with this, and that you're out to expose it?
That's correct, sir.
With your background and what you know, can you give us a hint on what we ought to do?
No.
No. Is it too late?
I actually believe it's too late.
So what you're telling me, every one of us should be in fear of this because every one of us at some point will be targeted?
The technology's advanced that far.
One of the men behind the technology admits he created a monster. An experiment in control, gone out of control. And what's worse, there's no telling how far it will go, or if it can ever be stopped.
These devices have been around since the very early 1990s, even before in different forms, and became more widespread amongst criminals over the last 30 to 40 years. Criminals who just happen to be organized in a cult, and that's not just my own opinion. As if the hidden hand wasn't hint enough. They basically are the mafia when that term is thrown around. And as you can see, they've been using electronics to induce mind control since the 1950s and MK Ultra. Also remember, Nazi scientists obtained through Operation Paperclip after World War II helped the US military develop technologies like MKUltra. The Soviets obtained theirs also. They are no small part of all this, the lies of NASA or this great work of theirs. NASA was originally comprised of ex-Nazi Freemasons. That's how the US was so comfortable giving them money, houses, cars, new lives, and positions of influence in academia and elsewhere. And let's not forget how into the occult the Nazis were known for being. The entire movement was wrapped up in symbolism, arm in arm with the Catholic Church and hidden hand puppeteers behind both. And yes, it says there in the Patriot Act that the government can technically use us as guinea pigs for chemical and biological testing, totally indemnifying themselves. It does not include mind-altering electronic warfare, however. I have to address this because the whole Big Brother 1984 theme people keep talking about is more serious than a little censorship. And as I was implying, it would be Big Mother anyway. I know many targeted individuals or TIs wonder why they get selected for harassment and torture. Their lives are being unraveled as they're driven slowly insane because they often have no concept of any of this or even the half of it. Criteria may differ between individuals, but often comes back to money or the ownership of things, the root of all evil. Or maybe one of the satanic Masons wants your job. Again, Lincoln. Or as an ex-Army intelligence officer put it, a target of opportunity. Religion does have a lot to do with it also. It may be the main factor in choosing a victim, for some. It's at least been accounted for enough to know that they generally go after intelligent people, analytical minds over the simple. They're less entertaining, I guess. In my case, it's a non-union family business I'm supposed to be collateral damage from. As I said before, and as that intelligence officer inferred also, this is all toward a form of genocide. That's not just me saying that. I don't know if anyone's been paying attention, but that attack is also being focused on the white Western male mainly. Which is ironic when there are really no people of color amongst the hidden hand. Hating the white patriarchy is a diversionary tactic of the Sabbateans I mentioned. Militant feminism is promoted along with race and gender wars. Most understand it's divide and conquer, so is this. It's about breaking up the Western nuclear family, black, white, whatever, and herding us like cattle into a chute. One that includes a lot of homelessness as the policies of think tanks like the World Economic Forum bear down on Western society. Own nothing and you'll be happy. Eat bugs. Get the shot, you're gonna die anyway. There is no singular explanation for being targeted though, aside from their organization ultimately laying the ground rules with an endgame in mind. The Big Mother dystopia of a great work. The structure can be explained through Plato's Republic and or Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, which has morphed from communist ideals into a more digital format. The perpetrators are just performing a function within the organization that enables the end result, nothing more. It makes it hard to point fingers. They still need a relatively short range for LRADs, long-range acoustic devices and voice-to-skull, called V2K, even if they can still spy on you from afar. So for a targeted individual or TI, your best bet is to move away from people and neighbors within a few hundred yards at least. Get away from towers. The more trees, the better. I know that's not possible for many, so you can try making a Faraday cage, as some TIs do. There are a lot of people out there being used as toys by holier-than-thou degenerates playing God to others as a criminal pastime and even occupation. So rather than military personnel per se, or similar, it's the dregs of the order that are employed. The patsy buffer and deniability factor. When I say degenerates, it's like how porn in particular, but any given addiction, eats away at the brain. They move bad actors with literally no moral fiber or ethics resembling human, literal pedophiles, as close to a target as possible when a house or apartment is available. They are literally stalking children in their own homes. Then the routine of psychological warfare ensues, which they're provided and basically trained in with attack and evasion protocols. They try to seclude the target with paranoia and fear tactics of street theater gang stalking and harassment, gaslighting conflict they'll remain innocent of while the target is institutionalized or incarcerated for causing all the trouble. Then their problems only amplify from there. It's not entirely electronic. Smear campaigns amongst the union lackeys may figure into some people's situation, And for some criminals, it's likely a training exercise. And all the while, as people are dying, I'm certain they're keeping a database of statistics for how minds are being affected. Make no mistake, people are in danger by the thousands, and this will only get worse as the technology improves. Driving someone insane and having them commit atrocities is a game to them. The Masons have a motto, Ordo ab Chao, meaning order from chaos. It's also a Hegelian dialectic, a problem-reaction solution. It becomes so rampant that action must be taken, draconian action. And they always have a solution. We just haven't seen the final one yet. Another thing the intelligence officer and I agree on, aside from the genocide, is that they do this together with their own private broadcasting network, a death network, which is like the kind of interactive TV we've seen on networks that integrated the internet. Do you realize why they really called the internet a web or net? Strange that both, not just one, mean something to get caught in, while language is taken seriously and symbolically by the hierarchy. If I had to wager a guess, though, their secret network would most likely use this symbol as their logo, which I'll just show briefly. This is the symbol of sex and death, or life equals sex plus death, like an equation, mostly death. It does not mean hugs and kisses, it's older than that, but a Satanist will use it that way. It's more male-female fertility symbolism. Venus and Saturn, what some call the real mark of the beast. But Saturn's hexagram has all the criteria and an actual beast. You can kind of see how it already is a death network symbol, and I don't need to elaborate on that. But I mean an underground one. The aforementioned devices are being used to control individuals in the public and turn them into puppets to be laughed at by their slave handlers. That is effectively the relationship between victim and oppressor, slavery, and as Dr. Duncan put it, soul catching. They enjoy being demonic and toying with people's emotions, as well as literal hypnosis and even alter personalities in some cases, a big part of MKUltra. Religious people can see how this might be a problem. In fact, that is a reason to do it. And I will suffice it to say they can do more than just throw a few voices. Don't diminish this as some kind of prank. It's serious and deadly. The handlers have handlers, slaves of slaves down the Egyptian pyramid, destroying lives and families as a joke while they watch them spiral out of control. And it should be noted that the U.S. military has a history with a satanic order called the Temple of Set, created by psychological warfare expert Colonel Michael Aquino, author of Mind War, who with a scandal of satanic ritual abuse of children had the entire Presidio base in California shut down and all traces burned. They also let Colonel Aquino, who was actually discharged as a colonel, write the chaplain's handbook, a Satanist. You can see the PSYOPs connection here, though, and how it might be just a bit on the satanic side. I know about all TIs think so, the ones still alive and clinging on, and it's more than you think. The symbolism is somewhat obvious here, most of it just for showing allegiance at face value. Like Styx, at the bottom right represents the maiden mother crone, with the mother being Venus, and how we know it's Eastern Star is the Easter Island earrings and which way they're facing, as well as the mother. The Easter Island statues have been found to be depictions of giants, by the way. All the fallen angel references, beast skulls, and the rest are a symbolic logo of sorts. Logos meaning word of God, literally, which they take seriously, and we'll look at some Venus logos soon. Make no mistake, they fully believe in all of it. It's not just for show, and they find that out when they enter the world of entertainment and who runs it. Those Kabbalists of Hollywood and elsewhere. So they pander to the order and communicate it through symbolism, but are they part of the network? When people say they sold their souls, it can be meant in more than one context. But musicians will be and are among some of the first to go full gender neutral and jump in the fire of Venus's matrix. There are so many examples besides Marilyn there, who also represents the Magna Mater. The M&M we'll look at soon. Looking at the peanut panoply here, they obviously know something, so why aren't they saying anything publicly like help? They've had at least 33 Masonic years to do so. Maybe they're not pulling the trigger themselves, so to speak, but even then covering a crime equates to accomplice. It depends on how satanic and sadistic they are, I guess. And I would say more if it didn't get this removed for accusations. They leave a lot of clues in album sleeve art as well as lyrics and music, which would help verify the veracity of this claim if it were looked at as a body of evidence. Especially ones who like making commercials for fun. It's pretty hard not to draw a parallel considering who they all work for besides the Hidden Hand, the Rosicrucian Palm. See, eyeballs, Vesica Piscis symbols, fertility symbols, double-headed eagle, which is symbolically both Rome and Freemasonry. And no coincidence, has order from chaos underneath. The double eagle symbol goes back to Sumeria and Assyria, probably before. Pause if you want to look at this at any length. Temple of the Dog, opposite of God, I would suppose, or the dog star Sirius and or Venus. To be blunt, if you don't pay homage to the Satanic Union number 666 of our Babylonian Horse Church of Unholy Sorrows, or start to own controlling interest in areas they covet economically, they have ways of washing their hands of murder, even if they didn't directly touch anyone physically. People are quick to judge celebrities based on their personas, their image, but don't forget the hidden hand that controls them. I think that's him on Metallica's first album cover. Well, a little more communist with the hammer and all, but that's kind of the point. Who do you think Richard Pryor is being burned by here? Definitely not the KKK. It really isn't a stretch to say Hollywood and the music industry are in fact run by Satanists, very real ones who mean very real harm. A consideration here is that some of these people we've been seeing in entertainment as well as government suddenly going full LGBT are hearing voices telling them to be that. Why it all seems so strange and sudden. Or maybe someone who grabs a gun and decides to murder a crowd full of people or a school or run them over with their car after having what amounts to a microwave pointed at their head from a distance for long enough. The guns they mean to take from us are not the problem. These mind control devices rampant in the satanic covens buried in the public are. They create frustration and anger, why LRADs for one are a crowd control weapon with a lot of opposition to their usage. That causes permanent hearing loss, among other things like, say, brain damage. Maybe some victims aren't hearing voices at all because it's silent and subliminal, transferred outside the range of hearing. So it's just an idea they woke up with one day. And then they started thinking they're something that they're not, and it is a they-them pronoun because it's they and their handler who's been assigned to them. It's total control over a person's mind without them even being aware, soul-catching. You can see how it might get religious on that context alone. They make it that way. It puts a new spin on the whole idea of becoming a transhuman transgender robot, and how that's really only a step away from having consciousness implanted in a matrix, not to lose sight of the big picture here. And I don't mean to imply that everyone is being controlled. That's for TV to do. But there is an aspect of normalization that becomes a trend or fad for SJWs in the brainwashing department of your local edifice and bastion of academia. College, mainly, and who are generally the philanthropic benefactors of the Ivy League and the rest? I wonder where these crazy professors are getting their ideas. There's nothing the Freemasons aren't a part of. People generally use the word Illuminati here, which did impact the organization and outlook of Freemasonry from the Age of Enlightenment onward. Albert Pike, who I mentioned before, was head of the American branch of the Illuminati, the Freemasons. He obviously thought Rome was in charge at the time, while the Sabbateans hadn't shown their hand yet. The Illuminati were not who they're presented as, though, nor are they really the name behind the hidden hand. But their goals read almost identically to the Communist Manifesto, and no coincidence. Both were derivatives of Republic and New Atlantis in structure, but your rights being no property, no inheritance, no familial ties, and no religion, except what the dystopian state gives you. Coexist. Looking at the symbolism here, the talisman of Saturn in particular of all the planetary talismans represents the beast of biblical revelation, which becomes clear later if it's not already. He's their true as-above aspect of God, not Jupiter or the sun, though they recognize and incorporate all the pagan planetary, solar, and lunar gods. But in the context of the Illuminati people keep calling them, we have a Venusian or Luciferian cult, the pentagram, and a Saturnalian Sabbatean cabal, hexagram, behind this hidden hand, light and dark aspects of the same order, Ra versus Set, the light versus the dark. The Masonic checkerboard can be interpreted this way, but it's really that way so they can play sides against the middle in a psychotic melodrama against humanity like a card game. Good cop, bad cop, but both evil and with the same agenda for the same pagan gods, particularly Saturn, their Alpha Omega. Make no mistake that the United Nations Agendas 2030 and 2050, even calling them agendas, are all about making the great work happen. The communist police state of smart cities slowly shrunk into a digital singularity until only empty husks remain. If you watch the entire movie Metropolis, you'll see how much they knew of what I'm describing here and even how it involves their Queen of Heaven, Venus. But the UN's plan is no less Masonic or beholden to the same powers that have existed in different forms throughout our hidden history. And the UN was in fact created by the very same powers that prompted wars for the purpose of consolidation and to feed the beast. The United Nations has a publishing house called Lucis Trust, formerly Lucifer Trust, created by Theosophist Alice Bailey, an adherent of Madame Blavatsky and by extension Aleister Crowley, the self-proclaimed Beast 666. Most New Age spiritualism was promoted by Theosophists, and similar orders Crowley was a part of, by the by, much of it rooted in the occult. Interesting, it says they have no idea how the Baileys ever came up with that name Lucifer, but then go on to explain the tenets of that philosophy, let alone the fact they have an arcane school. Theosophists incorporated most basic mystery school symbolism into one logo, their Word of God. The Coexist logo is similar and incorporates blatant witchcraft symbolism as well, provided by the Catholic Church of unwitting Venus and Lucifer worshippers. Bear in mind along the way that Lucifer, like Satan, is just a description, the light bringer. Pause if you need a minute to read all this. All three of those Kabbalists at the top were contemporaries while the Illuminati was being formed for the purpose of subverting the church and white Western dominance, in which they inevitably succeeded. They were just collecting all the monarchs and influential people into one forum where they could be manipulated and undermined by a group outside their order, the Sabbateans, of which Meyer Amschel Rothschild was one. He was the banker for the Landgrave of Hessen-Kassel, a top member of the Illuminati. They psychologically goaded the rich and influential toward their ends using Age of Enlightenment philosophy to seem like it was their own idea. The Illuminati were used even if they tended toward the same ideas and Kabbalistic ritual arcana. The Rothschilds subverted national economies with war, specifically the Napoleonic Wars, through national loans and debts. It was only a small step to a World Bank afterward. They put forth the idea for a League of Nations, and failing that, the United Nations after the Second World War, theirs and other old world money families funded. All wars are banker wars. And while this would appear a Jewish-dominated endeavor, and is in the context of Kabbalist practices within the hierarchy, they are hardly the only architects of this great work. But as Theosophy conveys, they realized all these pagan world religions had the same source, including with Freemasonry, often with identical, if not just similar, symbolism. I can show for some amount of that using language, particularly the letter T. I don't mean to bore you with a language origin lecture, but if I'm going to make statements about similarities, I should at least show my work. The earliest alphabet has the inverted A, which is a bull. And the last letter, or omega, of Hebrew is Tav, or Taurus. The first and the last, the Alpha Omega, Chronos, Father Time. I'll show in the next image how similar in origin languages are, and that is part of the origin of the mystery schools in Kabbalism. How things are so connected from even before the flood. But that is how the Masonic symbolism relates to the beast of Revelation and their triple Taurus symbol on the right. It's also written at the beginning of the Torah with it, Alpha Omega as the name of God, but it's not Saturn. I'm just showing it for fast proof. I narrowed this all the way down to language origins and symbolism where I could. The important one being the transition of Tav in Hebrew. But it has all the sex and death symbolism buried in it too, even the Ankh, a symbol shared with Hinduism. It's an Ouroboros of infinite death and rebirth, like their sun god Ra. As you can see, the T is a universal part of human language. It mainly revolves around the solar cross and infinity in a sense, time. T is for time. Freemasons and Eastern Star protect this kind of information that could be in any school book along with a lot of hidden history. But then there are some things we'd all be better off not knowing, especially Satanists. You can see how there was an ancient worldwide culture that existed along with Atlantis, though, and then the survivors were cut off from one another. That would include mystery school knowledge they've been gathering up like Indiana Jones since the flood. But what's in question is the recreation of that same antediluvian culture with this great work, bringing back Atlantis with a new vision, or a revision of an old one. Possibly even including the symbolism of Saturn and Venus. This is brief, but Venus's 8-year cycle creates a pattern forming a 5-pointed star. That's how they arrived at that symbolism. It's also worked out very mathematically and appears so perfectly in sync with the harmony of the universe and the music of the spheres. Her symbol is the pride of many corporate logos, their word of God. And like Lucifer, she is also named the Morning Star, and as we saw, it's not just a shared title. She is the Magna Mater, the Madonna, the Shekinah, the Divine Feminine. The prefix Ma often relates to her. Matron, matrix, matter, Magdala, mandala. So many applicable things here, generally representing the matrix of time, the wheel of time that is her womb as well as the material. She's the original material girl, matter itself. But she needs a male counterpart, and there is one male of light for one faction, like the sun god Apollyon, or Ra Lucifer, and one of darkness for the other, Saturn Kronos, Satan. This is reflected in the eternal battle of Ra versus Set, or similar. Set, Saturn. Venus is also Isis, who sits back and cheers going, rah, 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 like a football game where the ball is shaped like her Vesica Pisces. The light versus the darkness. It's part of why Sunday follows Saturn Day, the Black Sabbath, with Venus Day, Friday, preceding them. But these are not white knights fighting evil. It's the two faces of evil they constantly talk out of the sides of their mouths from while telling their half-truths. They might as well be the same people. Both the light and the dark recognize the mother whore of Kabbalism, the Shekinah. Inanna Venus, who is also Ishtar, Asherah, Ashtoreth, Astarte, Athena, Diana, Minerva, or any given goddess generally accompanied by owls. Ptolemy called her the goddess with 10,000 names. Easter sunrise services taken from the ceremony where infants were sacrificed on altars with the blood running into fertility egg baskets. And while that was long ago, the results that are gained from the lengths this cult is willing to go to keeps their psychotic traditions alive. We'll talk about results later. Thank Emperor Constantine for bowing to the pagans, elite Romans, who made up half the early Catholic Church. They brought with them the Great Mother, the goddess who they say gave birth to the other gods, the first humans, the animals, and to nature, the universal mother, and then dressed her up as Mother Mary while the other half has no idea. Here you also see her as the crowned Queen Bee Magna Mater, the Roman M&M, Cybele. Cybele sounds similar to El or Bel, who is Saturn, yet another reason I say they are consorts. You can see how the gates of heaven are involved, with their own twist on it. The levels of heaven can be equated with the spheres and the music thereof. I will show how the architecture of Washington, D.C. and the Vatican represent the keys and Venus's womb later. The word Vatican means divining serpent or prophecy, and there's the huge dragon being born from a womb to prove it. We'll say born. It represents the cycle of life, obviously not human, but again, sex and death. Oh, and someone above them screaming or something. The Masons, like Egyptians, recognize the crown of the queen bee, as it were. I'm thinking alien hive mother, but you know, semantics. The eggs themselves also represent wombs, incubating something that requires blood sacrifice to fertilize. Now, why would people have ever thought such a thing in the first place, I wonder? Mickey Mouse won't make much sense without further explanation, though. Walt Disney was a Freemason who helped oversee the Demolay child masons, and even harmless things like Mickey are wicked when inverted and perverted. So are Disney movies where the mother either gets shot, hauled away in front of the child, or was never there at all. Disney has a problem with the Magna Mater, it would seem, the divine feminine, if you will, which clearly traumatizes young minds who witness these things. The mother cult likes to separate mothers. But then they sign deals with Marilyn Manson, the satanic Magna Mater. Consider Disney like the rest of Hollywood, understanding they are one of only six media conglomerate corporations left in the world, like Saturn, the sixth planet. Mickey represents us all as lab rats, a form of social engineering, emphasized by the Disney Channel show Lab Rats. Many people already know about the sexual imagery in certain newer Disney movies, but don't know about the Freemason Club 33, like the 33rd Masonic degree, where only the elite understand what the place is all about. Kind of like how certain people might happen to be Freemasons and have reserved box seats at church, say. The special people, the hidden hand, the chosen ones. I think some of these things were hidden more for the sick adults than brainwashing children, but it does influence. And chosen for what? Hell? So how does Venus figure into this image? Isis for starters, but every 2,160 years is an astrological age where Venus will rise in a given constellation. In our earliest history, it was Aries the ram, then Taurus the bull, and that is the time of the Bible and the many cultures who integrated a bull god like El, Bel, or Moloch, as the child-sacrificing Canaanites did. Taurus is the reason Satan has horns and a tail and why he's the beast. For him, the color red represents blood or fire sacrifice more than emotions. Getting fired up, let's say. The Egyptians had their cow deity that created the Milky Way. Even in the Bible, God had the Israelites put horns on the corners of the altar. And I don't even want to show all the statues and paintings of Moses with horns or horns of light. Take a look at this replica lyre from Sumeria. What's that on the front of the instrument? It was found in a tomb where the servants suffocated to death while playing music for their departed overlord. That's about the kind of treatment I'm saying our New World Order overlords might be expecting. The point here is the age of Taurus creating the idea of the horned god, like David Livingstone's dying god, but explained differently. You can see how it impacted symbolism of body parts as well as astrology. There's not a lot they didn't tie together through symbolism and apply to human sacrifice. Human sacrifice was considered normal worldwide. The Aztecs are a good example in why they needed to be as high in the sky with the gods while gouging out hearts, the screams of the dying reaching to heaven. People couldn't understand how that wasn't the right thing to do, and did this ceremoniously worldwide. Power in the blood, life force, the burst of emotional release as the spirit leaves the body. That's what their gods wanted. One of the main themes of the Torah and Bible is all about deterring human sacrifice, with Abraham and Isaac initially, thus God having the Israelites sacrifice animals instead. This is one reason they are Abrahamic religions. Sacrificing people is what the mystery priesthoods did, have always done. Then there's Jesus, but that's complicated. Why do you think the Catholics hang him up on their X or T? And have to have his body hanging from it as well, like the church doesn't know. Then there are the Krampuses, the original Christmas elves. They just love kids, as you can see. Again, horned god depictions, Satan's or Santa's little helpers. But Taurus is where all this symbolism is coming from, the beast. T is for Taurus, a cross. Let's look more at this light-dark paradigm. There are two sides to Satanism, the Luciferian path and the Saturnalian or Satanic path, the white and black Masonic checkerboard. The difference is Luciferians have a sun god who gave us knowledge, the light bringer or torchbearer, like Prometheus or Columbia, Venus. Obviously, the other is Saturn, Father Time, or Darth Vader, Lord of the Sith, like the Egyptian Seth, Father Time.
I am your father.
Their lightsabers even have the red and blue shift paradigm that Masons also incorporated into political parties, police lights, and more. That means they cover all spectrums. Bear in mind with this image, Jedi are wizards of a sort, and allegorically Knights Templar, actually, as the Church Emperor Pope hunts them down with Order 66 in the movie. In real life, Friday the 13th. But that is also the number of books in the Bible, ironically, 66. It's a parallel story, but reversed roles from the movie, actually, of the Templars who worshipped Baphomet, the demon goat boy, and the number 66, which is relative to Qliphoth in Kabbalah. The Knights Kabbalist, early Freemasons, basically, versus the Catholic Luciferians, Ra worshippers, rah. And then, like in the movie, they hunted them down as heretics. There was a time when they hated one another, but it's all Satanism in the end. The church has a giant dragon woman sun symbolism to prove it. It's the epic struggle of Ra versus Set, but in real life, and generally has a counterpart story in major religions. Theirs is just a different form of the epic struggle of good versus evil. And while white wizards or witches are supposed to be the good guys, see the words down on the left. Lucifer, donning his own creation. Yeah, I said Luciferian. This part can be very convoluted with Jesus and Horus having similar backstories, his disciples representing the 12 zodiacal constellations encircling the Son of Man, as it were, what Da Vinci's Last Supper symbolizes. So for these Luciferians, Jesus is Horus and just another iteration of the sun god. But it's the Magna Mater, the Mary Magdalene, if you will, who is the constant in it all, represented astrologically by Venus. Catholics steer well clear of certain sections of the Bible, particularly Revelation, because they are well aware the prophets of the Bible kept referring to their cult of pagan worship, now dressed up differently. In the West, it's represented by the Venusian star, like on flags, a cup of coffee, people's houses everywhere, etc. And even though they're merely riding on the back of the beast now, as it were, their fall from dominance, which I'll explain, they still own more property than any billionaire and exert considerable influence in the West, mainly due to the Jesuit order created by Jewish convert Ignatius of Loyola. In fact, we might construe that as how she, the church, is riding on the beast's back so happily, because of its origins. Not everyone who sees this will understand the Rothschild connection to the Sabbatean Frankists or the Illuminati without reading the books I showed earlier and listed, or even have the story straight if they do. I hate telling it, so I'll try to be brief. It mainly starts around the Spanish Inquisition era, with the Jesuit order being founded by Jewish convert Ignatius Loyola. This was a subversive move against the church. Revenge for the Inquisition, partly. Later, Jesuit Adam Weishaupt, also Jewish, created the Illuminati, and his order's goals were to destroy the church and Western values. The Communist Manifesto would be modeled on Illuminati ideals later, attributed to Karl Marx, again Jewish. Jewish banker Meyer Amschel Bauer named himself Rothschild or Redshield based on the god Mars. It's an acronym meaning Meyer Amschel Rothschild and Sons, Mars, god of war, who would later take over the banks of Europe through their own agents and connections, and eventually the entire Western banking system. Mainly it was done through wars, creating national loans and debts. They also infiltrated and even headed occult brotherhoods such as the Alta Vendita in Italy. While not a roster member of the Illuminati, Rothschild was the banker for a rich monarch and a top Illuminati member, the Landgrave of Hesse-Kassel. Jacob Frank, claiming to be the reincarnate Messiah of 1666, Sabbatai Zevi, happened along to meet them in Frankfurt during his travels and brought his Sabbatean orgy circus with him to instill his redemption through sin and do what thou wilt philosophy. Anything goes. That's Sabbateanism. purposely offend God in every word and act, which will bring about a phoenix-like death and rebirth like Ra versus Set. And most importantly, sabotage Zebi's time as the point in history when Jewish people took up the hexagram as a symbol, believing him to be the actual Jewish Messiah, with over 1 million followers far and wide. That's where the confusion of that symbol originated. Sabotage Zebi was a Satanist and partly responsible for the Jewish star. And then it just happened to turn out that the Rothschilds and associates emerged the most economically powerful people in the world by the end of the Napoleonic Wars. This virtually crippled the church's power. There's not a lot their family isn't invested in by now. As they acquired most of their wealth through war profiteering, they invested in the manufacture and distribution of anything that could possibly be considered war-related. About everything, not just weapons. They helped bring Judaism to the forefront as a religion over these last 200 years. No doubt using Freemasonry to bolster it, but mostly by bolstering the Zionist movement, as we can gather from who the Balfour Declaration is addressed to. Dear Lord Rothschild. They financed much of the new nation of Israel that we all now pander to in the West. But are they the puppet masters controlling the hidden hand in the great work? It's not like by appearances they be some kind of Satanists or something. There is some question of their biblically Jewish origins, though, at what point in history they actually became Jewish. Perhaps there's a book we can read. After their captivity in Babylon ended, Jewish people dispersed to various parts of the then-known world, and possibly some parts unknown as the tribe of Dan were seafarers. So if you think Jews were only comprised of Ashkenazis who numbered in the hundreds in the Middle Ages Europe, you are mistaken. There are a lot more than that, but the lineage remains in question. If you read David Livingstone's books, you will see that the Sabbateans originated in a very questionable part of the world for Jewish heritage, and played the Game of Thrones with various crowns. That may be why they're so white for a people who originated in the Middle East. Too many years in the Caucasus. Another book that helps explain all this very well is To Eliminate the Opiate by Rabbi Marvin Antelman. Eustace Mullen's books fill in the blanks of who was in criminal collusion with who, though what he researched ultimately made him very anti-Semitic in general. Henry Makow, also Jewish himself, has books and a website showing the ridiculous angles they create chaos in society from. At least half the scathing rebukes of the Sabbateans, at least accurate ones, come from other Jews. That's because, like every other society on earth, there is a hidden satanic element or hidden hand that just has to undermine everything that defines humanity in most people's minds. And they brought just about everyone around to their way of thinking by now, which makes it easier to enslave the populace with economic and social reforms. And they have the cash flow to make it happen. Control it, in fact. They're the reason we are using the term crypto for digital currency. Shh. Why the Sabbateans, as opposed to Jews, are the beast, though, is not just because they ended up controlling everything economically, or because of that talisman of Saturn in the age of Taurus, but because they used the Jewish people and sacrificed them in a war to plant their flag on the Holy Land. And when it's revealed to Jewish people who really sent them to their deaths and called it a Holocaust, a word historically meaning sacrifice, because that's exactly what they were to this Kabbalist cult. They might want to get together with all the Muslims the cult convinced to march around Saturn's cube and express their displeasure. They have a common enemy, not each other. Refer to the dead in D.C. and the Vatican if you're still unsure. It's been a satanic pagan order manipulating history the entire way, and as the world became smaller and more consolidated, the easier it was to manipulate. All nations, religions, and orders, including Freemasonry, were subverted, which became the vehicle for the mystery school hierarchy, the hidden hand. As we saw of the hidden hand, you don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist, or at least a Kabbalist.
There is a, I mean, you know, I used to say early on when I was a kid, I'd say, when I was a young senator, I'd say, if I were a Jew, I'd be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
Owl will talk about this condemning image later. Anyway, initially they wanted a League of Nations after World War I, but when that fell through, they finally arrived at the United Nations after the chaos they created during World War II. And I already showed their Luciferian publishing house. Rothschild agents in the USA, Jacob Schiff, the Warburgs, Morgans, and others, conspired to create the Federal Reserve in secret, and by extension, tax upon tax upon tax. They secured the USA financially and added it to their World Bank after having conquered Europe, then placed their Masonic symbolism on the dollar bill along with the owl of Inanna Minerva Venus in the upper right corner. It's almost imperceptible without magnification. Minerva was the Illuminati goddess, another Isis or Mare representing wisdom. And then there's the fact owls are vicious night predators that eat Disney lab rats, but hey, I'm probably just overreaching. There was also the fact he imprisoned a Rothschild, but Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu conceded that Hitler didn't want to exterminate Jews, just expel them. That's what the Havara Agreement was all about. Just get out. We'll send you your belongings. The early USSR saw the death of far more Jews than early Germany ever did. And it wasn't just the Holodomor, Holocaust, Holodomor. They were murdered. And who created both the USSR and Nazi Germany? The books say Wall Street and by extension London, but who owns the banking system? Between the Zionist movement and the Balfour Declaration, Jews were pawns. Europe and Russia were made inhospitable to Jews so they would flock to the motherland, all the while telling everyone the hexagram is a Star of David, and even making them wear one, when they were really unwitting sacrifices to Saturn. Taurus and that talisman are why there's a bull on Wall Street, why markets are bullish, and why they would do such a thing as promote both Hitler and the Bolsheviks. And who works for these people? The hidden hand. It was very much a Hegelian dialectic in action. And given the West's fealty and acquiescence to Israel, the Rothschilds funding the majority of Israel's creation, it's clear that Rome, the Venusian hoe of Babylon, lost its empire to an even darker power. And by extension of owning money supplies, they now own Hollywood, the porn industry, the media, academia, publishing houses, corporations or heads thereof, etc., etc. Some of the best Jewish experts of various scientific, philosophical, and even psychological fields of study have told us how to think, including Hegel and his dialectic, Freud, Nietzsche, Einstein, Sagan, and so many others, Ashkenazis being among the most intelligent people in the world. Hollywood comedians are there to make us laugh and then imitate them in day-to-day life like clowns. The Marx Brothers being a prime example. But as the saying goes, all wars are banker wars, and Mars is the god of war in their great work. They were bound to put their own people in control of everything possible by extension, whether really Jewish or not. It's easy to hide within Judaism as a religion while calling it your race. Even Muslims can't get away with that. That's how real Jews have been used. It really is like 1984 Big Brother, with large nations seemingly at endless war, being told what to say and think through media propaganda, most of which they don't even try to hide anymore, because they've dumbed the populace down to the level of deranged monkeys in many ways. My neighbors being a prime example. Among other diversionary social and political chaos, electronic domestic warfare helped turn the populace against itself, like the Stasi did with the East German population, or the SS in Nazi Germany, though with cruder methods. Divide and conquer, one step closer to a military state that requires some kind of communist solution and intervention. They control a narrative utilizing intellectual pragmatism, what's tangibly logical. And all the while being deeply religious themselves and having their academic and media mouthpieces tell us that science made God moot. In fact, they even say that men can get pregnant. But is that with or without science? As the chaos mounts and the hand brings order to it, there might end up being a lot of casualties. But that can also come not only from war or domestic upheaval, but also mass starvation like the Holodomor. And that can happen to any country now. If you've been paying attention, while billionaires like Bill Gates are buying up all the farmland, they are making it impossible for farmers to raise livestock and crops as inflation rises, while the media has been trying to push a narrative that eating bugs is in our best interest. Read between the lines. There are mass plastic caskets at the top of this picture that many of us have speculated about. There were also a few military exercises revolving around domestic upheaval, something that they want to be ready for at any given time, though. But that readiness will take care of whatever comes next. And if you want further verification for this, it's in murals and iconography at the Denver International Airport. It depicts a story of the phoenix rising from the ashes, so to speak, presumably World War III. But after peace is restored, you can leave out all those people of color, mostly anyway. Again, refer to the hidden hand. The airport was dedicated by the Freemasons as well as a non-existent entity, the New World Airport Commission. Just to note, this isn't all ages-old symbolism and architecture. It's also new. This is a subject all its own, though. They have been building up to this evil utopia of theirs for a very long time, the Great Work. Only it's hell on earth instead. I don't mean to paint a totally grim picture, though. There is hope and a way out of this. But this isn't it. I know there will be numerous people wondering about the aliens and how they fit into all of this, particularly the gray aliens, but there's not enough proof for what I need to say, and it's a lengthy subject. I think given the subject matter and history of the perception of aliens, clearly they are not our friends, or things might be different. I think the first thing to say here is why the hand clearly puts stock in the mystery schools, astrology, symbolism, and rituals if it's all just some interstellar visitors and spacecraft we're looking at here. They would have said, that was stupid, and moved on. How primitive. There was newer material to draw upon for photos, but personally I think most are fake, and more often human-piloted craft when not. A lot has been proven fake, and most whistleblowers turn out to be frauds. Or just way out there. The Nazis had saucers, but delta or V-shaped craft are seen more frequently, or even cylinder shapes. They don't have to be from another planet, and you'll see soon enough that even rocket scientists adhere to Satanism. Most of the original NASA team were Operation Paperclip ex-Nazis, whose former leadership was clearly invested in the occult. How far removed from that were they really? Why all the occult intertwined with weird science? This is yet another brainwash and half-truth anyway. I would argue that so-called aliens in the mystery schools have gone hand in hand all along. They're the reason for the ritual symbolism and arcane sciences, the demonology. The Nazis suddenly had amazing technology in numerous fields as if they were handed that information. That included rudimentary computers and television, a crude form of AI, and more, right down to how to build a flying saucer, which there are photos of. Very likely that's who people were seeing at least part of the time, Nazis, not extraterrestrials, when people like Kenneth Arnold helped coin the term flying saucer to begin with. But some of what Project Blue Book researchers for the US government in the 1950s and 60s concluded was that some UFOs were seemingly demonic in the way they could change shape or instantly disappear. Nothing about it struck them as angelic, apparently. I don't think we've gotten anything close to the truth since. Astronauts and pilots keep talking about seeing something and little else. And as you can see, the idea of beings from the stars goes far back into human history, written into every culture and religion. There is a reason why the NASA naming system for any given mission revolves around the pagan gods in some way. Or maybe a dragon or wizard like the Space Farce patches. Which begs the question why everything has to be about that. Just like if you turn on the TV, the chances of the show being about witches, the undead, or similar is greater than not. Everything is about that now. The alien question goes far back into history, and while the Ancient Aliens TV show presents a lot of relative and interesting examples and ideas, they are missing a necessary piece of the puzzle. Some think the gray aliens are the Watchers from the Book of Enoch, which equates to the biblical fallen angels, cast down for their crime against humanity. Maybe it's just me, but they don't appear very angelic, and from what I've heard, they can't fly without a flying saucer. Very little verifiable proof exists for any of it except for people's claims of abduction outside supposed whistleblowers, which are no less than demonic experiences if abductions are true, like the Travis Walton story Fire in the Sky. While the spiritual aspect is downplayed, it's considered a limited point of view to associate them with anything other than extraterrestrial, interplanetary visitors, as opposed to something of more local origin. The Torah and Bible actually supports the idea of other worlds in Deuteronomy 4:19 if you read between the lines, while simultaneously referring to demonology and the other practices inherent to Freemasonry and the religions this presentation started with. So both can exist and not be mutually exclusive. Whistleblowers keep saying the government secretly works with aliens or even that they're among us. There are also a lot of references to the idea of alien hybrid children, the black-eyed children as they've been called, black-eyed peas. Most all we've ever heard about so-called aliens has been demonic, though, not angelic. It's also been claimed the Greys are thwarted in abduction attempts by calling on Jesus for help. Given all I've shown, I think it's an abductee's best bet, because these are Saturn's little helpers. NASA is trying another moon mission and talk a lot about Mars, but I can't help but feel it's all just for show. NASA keeps lying, being caught recording underwater with bubbles coming from spacesuits, or in front of green screens while astronauts have traditionally been Freemasons. It's generally all talk about what we're going to do someday, and they mostly just spin their wheels with old technology while personal devices surpass the space race. It should be obvious by now, it's yet another half-truth, just like the giants or flood. Are they stalling for the singularity or even another reason?
When a sloth right there strolled into the frame.
He was only on screen there for a few seconds, but it was all anyone could talk about afterwards on social media. Even the European Space Agency agreed the sloth was the real star of the show.
Remarkable images from Texas. The FAA now investigating the explosion of the SpaceX Starship. Minutes after takeoff, the world's largest rocket.
I, and I'm sure many others, keep wondering why after 50 plus years, there is still no moon base built by any nation, not even a small outpost. It would be easier to launch rockets from there to, say, Mars, with less escape velocity required given the gravity. But then the NASA Nazis would have known about the flying saucers, and why aren't we flying around in those instead of rockets then? There's a lot of info about astronaut experiences involving aliens on the moon, the hollow moon, or even theories of a world space fleet. But I'm guessing it's all relative when we finally learn the truth. And the truth is Saturn feces. Unlike the X-Files, whose truth is way out there. These are people presenting alien perceptions to us. For example. Yeah, okay. I'm sure some will wonder if I don't mention Project Bluebeam or the impending fake alien invasion, which even seems to be ramping up now with propaganda media footage. It's very possible, right down to possibly destroying a few cities as a psyop for complete lockdown and martial law. But I don't care to speculate on that. Just be aware, and if so-called aliens suddenly show up in the sky for everyone to see, just question it to the bitter end. We're being set up about the whole idea of aliens in any case, Project Bluebeam or not. The Hand is not far off from turning us all into demonomata, possessed robots, the soul catchers. And in the background of all the alien propaganda, I'm saying these alien demon leprechaun elves and their gold, or gifts, or why those ritual symbols and logos the hand uses are so important, along with the keys to the gates of heaven and turning us into robots. It's ultimately for their benefit that we'd be trapped in a soul box like the one from Hellraiser, another cube. It's why I think they're stalling with space travel. We're not actually being allowed to leave Earth, or very far from it, for all their bluster about a space force. And even if they set up a nice Hollywood set showing them going to the moon and Mars, I'll reserve judgment until I can see it or someone I can trust sees it for themselves firsthand. I'll explain why aliens are demons in any case, but let me read you something first. Let me demonstrate with an image. From the online etymology dictionary, demonstrate, or demonstrate, from monstrum, meaning divine omen or wonder. See monster. Now, if these are demons, they are also jinn or genies who also grant wishes when summoned in certain talisman shapes. That's why they're unlucky charms. Just ask the Nazis. They say the Greys abduct people and do horrible things to them. I'd have to say that, along with all the rituals and symbols, it's really the same reason for the screams of ecstasy and ritual murder. The types of Kabbalistic rituals Aleister Crowley described, and sort of what Stephen King was trying to convey with his book, The Tommyknockers. These aliens are evil, and they're not experimenting. That's why it's catch and release. Not because there's anything about us they don't know already. They're feeding. They feed off humanity, but the parts we don't understand, energy and spiritual components of existence, your aura, whatever. Maybe that's what holocausts are for. A deal with demons and why they might flee from the name Jesus. It's right there in the large-scale Freemasonic dildo monuments, and who else did you think they were aiming that at? Like the native South Americans did with the Nazca lines. What some people may fail to reconcile here is that we have a spiritual aspect to our reality that transcends space-time and the universe we're physically bound to. Many abductees claim the Greys can walk through walls, cause paralysis, and more, ignoring the physical universe. Lending to this gray alien idea, Aleister Crowley drew this demon he conjured during a ritual. He called it Lam, the Tibetan word for way or path, related to chakra. Remember what I said about Islam or Isis-Lam. But that's what I assume you get in the orders, a little alien friend for life like the possessed kid in the movie Stargate, or Lam, laughable as that may sound. What we're made to think a Stargate is, like a wormhole or a tunnel through space, a perception created for us on a screen, may just be another Hollywood metaphor and gimmick for witch circle and demonology. People in Hollywood love Kabbalah and Aleister Crowley's OTO, who have in the past claimed to have contacted these beings. Kenneth Grant specifically, another Crowley associate. Until I'm shown differently, I'm saying we aren't going anywhere out into space. In the meantime, the cover story will be about aliens and technology, while it was really about demonology and souls. Hollywood, what druids make their wands from, like Mickey Mouse and Harry Potter use. All our perceptions are coming from there. That's why they have to warp and shape young minds into accepting things our grandparents would have taken for demonic immediately. And they would have been right because they didn't live in a world that told them to hate God yet, and weren't taught to wince or laugh at the name Jesus by perceptions built for us on screens, or in academia, in churches, or synagogues. It's all half-truth brainwashing in plain sight. They're contacting Saturn's little helpers, his own offspring, and abominations of creation. That's why it's Satanism, and it has to be this way with all the murder and the pedophilia. And it's all secretive while the elves never make first contact. For Sabbateans, this is the burden of silence. It originally means being one religion like Kabbalist Sabbatean, and then joining any and all other religions you have time for and undermining them toward your philosophy. I think you'll find the Freemasons are a part of every major religion from one angle or another as well. They merely represent the upper hierarchy of the mystery school priesthood, which is hidden within Freemasonry. They play God and Satan in every way possible in our lives while hiding within whatever institutions we may be a part of, particularly religious. There's no major organized religion Freemasons aren't a part of in some way, auxiliaries of the Sabbatean hierarchy. And from all media around us, along with social reform towards abnormalcy, it's clear we live in Saturn's world, and these Kabbalists just love feeding Saturn's parasite children. But shh, don't tell anyone.
Two can keep a secret if one of them is dead.
And as I was saying about them starving us out, does it make sense for everything to go electric when the power grid is already strained from a growing populace? Why they don't care when it makes no sense is because we're not even supposed to be here soon, all but these chosen people, and in most cases that includes a good portion of their own shills, brown-nosers, and useless minions. While this would seem counterproductive to feeding the beast, as it were, the plan still works perfectly with the Singularity's more streamlined trough system. Our souls will still be trapped in a box in the Singularity, for all intent and purpose. Electric will be perfect when there are only elites left who own vast swaths of countryside to themselves, until there are no humans left, and I guess that was the goal all along, thwart God, kill all humans. Essentially, that's what the Singularity will do. But since they can't do it directly, they can get us to do it to ourselves. We have to admit we are putting a strain on the environment in every way possible, and these chosen mean to take it for themselves before we ruin it beyond long-term repair. But whose fault is that for giving us what we thought we wanted? If these mystery school children have always made deals for knowledge and power, then isn't what we are now their fault? The earth will always heal, just not quickly sometimes, and even quicker without people on it. They mean to get ahead of it, and the target population seems to be about 500 million, as per the conveniently and recently destroyed Georgia Guidestones. 500 million is about 7.5 billion less than we have now, and so they are stepping up their game more quickly each year. And with a lot of people thinking we're on the brink of World War III, in it long ago, really. Just remember this beast is the owner of the world banks, arms manufacturer, and distribution and all else. Any wars that happen are generally planned well in advance. And if in doubt, you need to read the aforementioned books. Wall Street and London were always working an angle, business as usual even during the wars. But they had a hidden hand, so to speak, pulling their strings. Regardless of whether the Rosicrucians or Roman Catholics built this thing, whoever R.C. Christian was, it was speaking to a truth of an elitist and genocidal ideology. Now, while the Guidestones are only flimsy evidence for architecture, let's look at the key lock or womb symbolism behind some larger monuments with even more relevance. The obelisk or sun cross is the male to the Vesica Piscis or Wheel of Time matrix of the divine feminine, the X and the O. It's why the dead, especially in Egypt, have their arms crossed. It's on sarcophagi. You can see a few logos using the Vesica Piscis, so it's not all stars. There are other symbols used, which aren't only for showing allegiance, but also for creating spirit energy. Here we have St. Peter's, the Vatican, and George Washington's memorial. They are built nearly identically, with only subtle changes in the symbolism. Obelisk in the middle of a female symbol on the right with a key symbol on the left. The keys are for the silver and golden gates of heaven, newborn souls and the dead, while Ki also means Ka, an Egyptian word for soul or spirit. This is the Holy See logo in architectural form. Some amount of it can be attributed to Solomon and his temple, which is highly revered in Freemasonry, particularly the Keys of Solomon, a mandala of sorts, and a key of the universe. Life and death, even the summoning of spirits. They're highly revered symbols of the occult. It's all about the gates of heaven and controlling them as opposed to the facilitation of souls. The symbols within symbols are taken very seriously for their spiritual power, and I'm sure the sacrifice of the dead won't be forgotten. You don't really think these people intend to help you along to heaven, do you? You'd think they were possessed to build something so ridiculously childish in symbolism. Washington's memorial has a Vesica Piscis shape underneath his shaft of illumination, which are overlapping fertility eggs. The entirety is both a giant womb as well as a male member, dual symbolism. It all faces east to the Capit's Owl building, which looks like an owl for a reason, and we'll look at that soon. The notes at the top right shows the interconnectivity between the symbolism and how it applies here. The tarot card has Yahweh, the Tetragrammaton, as well as the cardinal constellations that encircle the sun, which is known as Ezekiel's wheel, or the crown of the Magi. And look at who the Ouroboros serpent is that's encircling the solar cross, or Taurus symbol, that I've already established is Saturn's. But in some symbols, the hexagram is used instead of the cross. If Jesus died on a cross, it's because they put him on their symbol, their matrix of time. T is for time. The X is supposed to be a male symbol, but it's eternal like the sun it symbolizes, which makes Jesus himself and his sacrifice all the more ironic. But when the hexagram is involved, it most definitely refers to Saturn. Either way, it's Satan. But at each site, the dead face east as a sort of symbolic sacrifice. I believe it says the word on the memorial website at least twice. The English language retained a lot of Egyptian references, a couple I showed here, but also that we're casting a spell when we're spelling and performing a ritual when we write. Just common words here and there, but many more than most would believe. Theosophy obscured the satanic angle by calling it New Age spiritualism. Again, largely derived from teachings shared with the likes of Aleister Crowley. While people will tout yoga and Eastern medicine, that's all fine and well, but that's not the core of the problem with it. It's the orders who guide these belief systems and make them what they are. Mostly tripping you up so you never find your way to the real answer, what will really connect you with God. What they offer is an illusion, really, like a self-help book. Satanist L. Ron Hubbard wrote one of those that doesn't quite allow you to identify that question you need answering. It's all astrology and sun worship from any angle. Venus is involved, or we wouldn't plaster her star everywhere, even inverted as the Eastern Star logo is, which represents the goat of Mendes as used in classic Satanism. Each male-female talisman has its own Venus pentacle, while she is the only female constant, the divine feminine in this arcane so-called science. Here you can see the pentagram and the rest together. There is one road missing to form the entire pentagram, but I think it's pretty well visible, and if it weren't for Minerva's owl, Venus's owl, being so obvious, the rest might not carry that much weight. But together I think it all fits together pretty obviously, as if the fertility symbolism wasn't enough. That symbolism is connected to Venus Minerva at the Capit's Owl building, and since she's Ishtar Easter, as well as Isis, like the cult of Isis, the symbolism faces east toward her, the Eastern Star, and that's their logo. While Lincoln, Washington, and the dead face east to the Babylonian goddess, are those her eggs being fertilized at the monument? Fertilized with the blood of the dead, as with the old Ishtar Isis cult? She is the Queen of Heaven, remember? Dropping her space eggs that probably have little leprechauns just waiting to jump out of them like the harmless little raptor in Jurassic Park. That would be their little demon friends that teach things to people like Nazis, like the kind who stayed in the US after Operation Paperclip. Children of Nazis, a whole other topic. But believe me, it will still have Satanism in it. They all want to be little gods, and the deviants and morally bereft are brought on board once they prove themselves. Usually that's through some form of coercion or blackmail rather than actual trust, or just keeping that stardom or life that they're used to enjoying. People can be made to discard their morality pretty easily when money, fame, and dark desires can be obtained, just at someone else's expense generally, a sacrifice maybe. That's the difference between Christians and Satanists. Christians sacrifice themselves, but Sabbateans, Saturnalians, Satanists, or whatever you like, sacrifice others. But again, it's all to feed the beast.
That's how I got introduced to the music industry. 'Cause I swear I wanted to be like the Amy Grant of music. Yeah. But it didn't work out, and so I sold my soul to the devil. Sold my soul to the devil.
Why do you still do it? Why are you still out here?
Well, it goes back to the destiny thing. I mean, I made a bargain with it, you know, a long time ago, and I'm holding up my end.
What was your bargain?
To get where I am now.
Should I ask who you made the bargain with?
with the chief commander.
On this earth?
And this earth, and then in the world we can't see. And I made a bargain with it.
Now with new improved witchery. So they are fully on board with helping Big Brother and his Freemasonic auxiliaries do the dirty to the public when called on. Those who don't are probably dead, and they can do it from afar without leaving a trace, and it all looks like the victim just had an episode. It's the externalization of the hierarchy, being slowly rolled out with each passing generation, so that the younger generation will accept these new normals every time something challenges the status quo. And they'll call it progress, while impressionable young minds use it to rebel against the older generation. They get us to do it to ourselves, fighting against the ethics our ancestors had ideally molded themselves into better people with. But that's all going away, entropically decaying into oblivion. That was the point. The serpent has always represented spirit energy, and the Egyptians weren't the first to use that metaphor. It was also represented with the staff of Moses, where it became a serpent as a sign to those who would recognize it for what it meant, the priesthood. But something to note here is the beast of Revelation has 7 heads, as some of these creatures do. The ancients just had this worldwide fascination for 7-headed serpents and demon creatures, aside from dragons in general, apparently. 7 is the number of God and completion of creation, while 6 is the number of man. And there will likely be a symbolic connection with the 7-headed beast of Revelation also, a metaphor surrounding this cult the prophets railed against throughout the Bible. We were warned about them all along. I'm not saying I agree with this, and I'm only showing it to say I'm aware, but a lot of people, including David Icke, insist we have lizard people running around in high places. I won't say they're wrong, given what those cold-blooded subhumans are capable of, and there are tons of leads you could follow here. But if anything, it's a distraction from the real aliens, rituals, and the possession, another half-truth. Not to dismiss it, there are stories of lizard people living in caves in Peru and Vietnam, opposite sides of the earth, and every other so-called conspiracy theory has lizard people attached to it somehow. They are taken seriously as many people take Bigfoot seriously. Peru has some other interesting links also in the next image, but is it all to cover a form of demonic possession obtained through ritual like a lot of it is? Here's another worldwide example showing serpents. Casaro calls it the God Self icon. Is it a man or a legendary hero, like Gilgamesh, Nimrod, Samson, Hercules, or Osiris, represented by Orion? Whatever the answer, it is clearly a worldwide phenomenon and often shown battling a serpent, which again can represent spirit energy. More information about temples like these can be found with the Flood on the Bright Insight channel and others. While much of this is probably antediluvian, it seems that after the Flood, when technology was lost, the builders around the world started making step pyramids almost immediately so they could take up old practices, like ritual sacrifice at the tops of temples. They were very anxious to get back to appeasing someone very bloodthirsty. The Atlantean period, we'll call it, would have seen greater architecture like the Cyclopean masonry, Old One Eye again, and the Giza pyramids, Pumapunku, Baalbek, just to name a few. There's no denying it's worldwide, though, and given the worldwide practices people took up with ritual sacrifices, particularly to the sun god, then you have to wonder what was going on before that in Atlantis. It's very possible that they were as close to humanity destroying itself as we are now, and unfortunately had to be euthanized before the disease could completely kill the body of man. And then we got another chance, with freedom of choice, to be stupid all over again. This seemed as good a place as any to interject the flat earth, since we're talking about ancient history, mostly because I'm sick of hearing about it. There is a reason these half-truth tellers came up with Musica Universalis, also called Music of the Spheres, that revolves more around the idea of universes as opposed to worlds. But it's all connected like clockwork and also gave rise to Age of Enlightenment ideas like the plurality of worlds. What I'm saying is get a telescope, look at everything out there tonight, and tell me if you see any squares. The idea has been suggested that early sailors created flat earth propaganda so their competitors wouldn't sail as far and take their profits. Very likely. As I mentioned, Deuteronomy 4:19 claims what you see out there is other worlds and people. So God made us live on a square to surround us with spheres that other people live on. Yeah, okay. I've seen the evidence in all the little home experiments. How does a sound wave work? What happens when you ripple a pond? Is it square? There are not a whole lot of squares in nature, actually, and neither is the earth. And it's not flat, like your head. It's more like a Fibonacci sequence, like your head. Moving on. Satan is said to be a serpent of some kind. Many ancient creation stories, like Sumerian and certain Native American, have parallels, as the Sumerian does with the Pentateuch and Bible, actually. We could draw many parallels. Another interesting point is that the Americas were known to native people as Amaruca, or Amaruca, land of the winged and plumed serpent, Quetzalcoatl. That's why there are serpent mounds in North Amaruca, and why all the southern Amarucans, the Aztecs, were stabbing people in the heart in the name of the sun god. Then they became Planned Parenthood. But I digress again. Even the Chinese are obsessed with dragons, but I don't want to labor this point. And it's obvious from global lore that something reptilian is involved, at least something sneaky, snaky, while most theories are better off in a fantasy novel. I included the eagles here because originally the USA was to have a phoenix, as shown on that coin in The Economist magazine, half owned by the Rothschilds. The phoenix may have been derived from fire-breathing dragon lore originally, but dragons aren't the only thing our ancestors were globally obsessed with. An important aspect that's relative to the Ma prefix of the Madonna or Magna Mater is the mandala. The mandala is a representation of the matrix like the flower of life is. But in more scientific mathematical terms, it represents the wheel of time, space-time, which is what they are experimenting with at places like CERN, the Large Hadron Collider in Europe, looking for the God particle, the glue that holds the Magna Mater together. There is also a phenomenon called the Mandela effect, where things we all remember together in one sense has changed in books, movies, products, or any number of things. The words will be different, or a symbol or logo, but we all remember it another way, as if it were mass hallucination. Some people have never heard of this, so I'll say again. Very real things we remember together as a group has distinctly changed in the world, and no one can answer why. Notice the name, though. Mandela effect. Mandela, very similar to the Mandela effect. It started with a story about Nelson Mandela that people distinctly remember differently. But is it just propaganda and manipulation? If I were to say propaganda, it would be because the guy has a stamp with his Knight of Malta outfit on. Desmond Tutu was their tutu. Coincidence? There's a half-truth in here also, we can be sure, and something demonic. Are the mad scientists of Kabbalah purposely or inadvertently affecting space-time, theoretical parallel universes merging with our own reality? There are so many instances of the Mandela effect that it is its own topic, and it's not something that can easily be proven. I've already disproven a couple I questioned myself. But are they manipulating space and time, opening up the floodgates of hell as it were, or even hoping to bring together that conjunction of Venus and Saturn to symbolically usher in a non-binary Messiah? Maybe that's why they tamper with things they know they probably shouldn't, and sit there smiling while telling us we'll all be machines one day. Yes, rocket scientists do worship Satan, at least on occasion. We know that L. Ron Hubbard, Jack Parsons, and a woman named Marjorie Cameron performed a ritual on behalf of Aleister Crowley called the Babylon Working. It was supposed to bring the dark Venusian spirit of wild abandon into the world. Most are aware of who L. Ron Hubbard was, but not half as much about Jack Parsons. Some say Jet Propulsion Labs was really Jack Parsons' labs while he was an innovator of rocketry and fuel. From Wiki, he was frequently observed reciting Aleister Crowley's poem, Hymn to Pan, in an ecstatic manner compared to the preaching of Billy Graham during rocket tests, as in plural. Pan is the Roman version of Baphomet, a Greek satyr or satire, an extension of Age of Aries occultism. But you can see how scientific that is, satanic verses during rocket tests. Marjorie was to be the embodiment of the spirit. The part about the star Wormwood is from the book of Revelation when the earth is pounded out by a comet from God. Casting not the first stone, as it were. Very poetic. Were they hoping to destroy the world with Babylon? The Babylon symbol has 7 points because it reflects God completing creation on the 7th day in the Torah. Were they thinking anti-creation? The abandon is pretty wild in the world now anyway, whether they were really successful or not. I can only assume they associated Venus with Babylon anyway, regardless of the name of the goddess they used. And in any case, this was an example of perverted rituals based on Crowley's sex magic. But at least they didn't use children, so far as we know. I had a lengthy video about pedophilia in numerous governments that got removed. By the end, and after hearing from all the different interviews, it was obviously satanic in origin and worldwide. Mainly verified by Ted Gunderson, who had retired from head of the FBI in Los Angeles. He knew it wasn't just secluded instances of random cults. It was organized and global, enemies of Jesus and God. Later, he died mysteriously, as so many do while exposing this evil. Kind of like the liability who was Jeffrey Epstein, and we still haven't gotten a single name out of his accomplice, Maxwell. Big shocker, I know. I may try to upload that one again after some editing, but the point here underscores what redemption through sin, or doing what thou wilt, entails. Satanic ritual abuse involves bursts of extreme energy, which is why Crowley coined the term sex magic. But also how sacrifices are enhanced and why the innocence of children has to be involved. Satanists are the reason why pedophilia and child trafficking is so pervasive. Many celebrities talk about an alter ego that lives inside them, whether that's a performer like Beyoncé or a stage magician. So many make this claim. While Christians will immediately say demonic possession, there's a little problem of voice of God throwing, and electronics to put in its place. So even if that were true, it would be covered in a facade of technology and psychological programming. Pizzagate was a widely recognized instance of pedophilia in government circles in the USA that overflowed with evidence and was brushed under the rug by these Satanists like so many other instances. They don't just do these things because they're demented, but also because of the sex magic and heightened emotions of the victim help them feed their little green beasts like Lam. That's what I'm saying. That comment about lab rats and Mickey Mouse was no joke. Besides all the child trafficking and satanic ritual abuse, there are a lot of TIs. targeted individuals out there all over the world having their brains turned into mush right now by this cult. It's really just a game for them, even if the hierarchy has an end result in mind for it. But this is not something a person with no wherewithal can handle on their own. They will end up institutionalized most likely because the cult prefers it to death while they play God in the hell on earth they've created. Many will commit suicide, but no doubt aided by the music they chose, while others will try to seek some form of help from authorities only to be met with a schizophrenia rap, the only kind of help they'll get. They most often don't know what an LRAD, voice to skull, voice of God, or any of that is. Hearing voices, eh? Then it's off to the psychiatric ward, where worse things certainly await. There was a Twilight Zone episode where the main character discovers that the psych ward was run by gray aliens all along. Close. It was Satan's helpers, little helpers, the Sabbatean Nazis. But these lab rats here are just a prelude to us all becoming the slave robots our hidden hand envisions. And failing that, at least an abomination that they hope to drag to hell with them. That's what redemption through sin is all about. Inverting everything natural and corrupting innocence. Being a non-binary robot is about the biggest affront to God we could make. Thus the push to be that. And then we'd all be hackable puppets along with. But worse would be giving our consciousness, our souls, over to the singularity entrapped in its matrix. That's the end game, but who is really driving it? Are the satanic politicians and elite really wanting to live there? Or are they in it too deep with the little green men from Saturn, too possessed? I would guess it's a lot of empty promises in any case. I know the people I'm aiming this at have been beaten with so-called science factoids and propaganda for so long, there's no rational, tangible proof a person could give besides showing what their personal enemy wants to do to them to show you really need to take a side here. Your consciousness is just energy for someone with the ability to upload to the cloud, as it were, or download into the trash bin, your spirit. Your physical brain is just a temporary hard drive for a technology that's beyond comprehension, seeming like magic to most people. And guess who's going to use that against you and knows better? I know we've all been taught to wince at the name Jesus, like saying Jew in public, to even feel humiliated to say. It's conditioning. But he is the only one who will lead you to the real God as opposed to the manufactured one. And gives more than one context to being what saved means here. Think about it. The Kabbalists laid an evil trap in the name of their fraud god that behind its lies clearly hates humanity with a burning passion. Yes, they are now the sun gods too, working on it anyway. Don't be a butthead. These are Satan's rejects and God's both. The writing is on the shirt, and you can choose to go live in a Hellraiser cube with them and Santa's little helpers. If not a feeding trough, then at least the singularity is a way to affront God and say we have your children's souls. But it's always a choice, at least up until the point of so-called death. People have near-death experiences every day, almost all of them involving an out-of-body experience where nothing is tangible and no one can hear them except others in the same predicament. It's told the same way by just about every person that experiences death and returns. Then they're suddenly flushed down a dark hole or shot into a light, which can be likened to a sci-fi Stargate or warping space-time as many of us have seen in movies, only a lot more vivid, colorful, and indescribable. Do you think they don't still take those gates to heaven seriously? They definitely adhere to it while telling the rest of us it's not science, or their version of it, therefore it's BS. Sorry, Saturn excrement. I know skeptical people always want to know why God was such a ruthless God in the Bible if he's so loving, killing all those so-called innocent people, seemingly at random, or at least a cover story for the Israelites to make war. It was epigenetics. Coupled with the mysterious giants and the Atlantean Empire, we're calling it, that had presumably gone too far, or the entire Earth wouldn't have been wiped out. Because in other examples, there were only a limited number of people that needed to be dealt with, if you noticed. And by epigenetics, I mean the kind of thing we're seeing now, the merging of genders and machines with humans, while in the background sits this creeping, evil presence spurning the whole thing forward. Not just people, but a hateful, spiteful, alien kind of presence. And as people are drawn into this sick, degenerate cult and even breed their ethics into each generation, their power has allowed them to slowly absorb the collective consciousness into their way of thinking, as if it's our own idea. Take music, for example. Is it really what people wanted? Or what was promoted and even groomed to a certain design? How about fashion? Go look at a modern fashion show and tell me you're still on the same planet, let alone Babylon. Insanity becomes rampant, and then the underbelly continues to feed on human misery and even corrupt the minds, souls, and bodies of children. Why wouldn't God blow that up? It's a disease of the human spirit, let alone genetics. Need I go on? You'd think these people were possessed or something. It wasn't just in the Bible that entire cities were wiped out either, at least the Christian one. The Hindu Mahabharata has similar stories, and there is a place in India called Mohenjo-Daro, where it appears like a nuclear device of some kind went off thousands of years ago. Given the irradiated soil, people were found fused and huddled together like they saw imminent doom coming. Again, buttheads, don't be one. Or a dragon rider either. Their wings are getting clipped.
I made a bargain with it.
Now, does this XO Skull and Bones look like an angel of death that wants to eat your soul? I'm leaning toward demon or jinn myself. From a personal perspective, I believe they masquerade as our actual creator, like the Wizard of Oz, while being crypto gods, that only want us to destroy ourselves in actuality, while people pander to them for knowledge and power or money or whatever through Kabbalistic rituals. They are the Satan that fooled the world, demonoid things, and those who follow them on earth, so below, not the actual angel who keeps getting confused with Lucifer or Satan, the wayward son of God. A Frankenstein creation of his maybe, but not an angel. Some of the smartest people in the world, as the human curve goes, are going to look like this very soon. When we remove the mask or persona hiding the real demon, I think we're going to find more than a few not-so-good Krampuses, or some other alien thing that has gotten into these people. And if you made it this far, I didn't want to leave you completely devastated. I told you the way out of their Ouroboros of doom already anyway. God does have a plan, and rather than extract the vermin from humanity, he ends up having to remove humanity from the house we let get infested while he was away, before he's forced to burn it down with the vermin in it and rebuild. It's called the Book of Revelation. The Whore is basically Kabbalah as a religion behind all these others masquerading as Abrahamic, but it's also Venus. As above, so below. The beast Satan is clearly Saturn from the ages of Taurus and Aries, and the synagogue of Satan has carried on traditions in his name since before Babylon. It's a question of waking up and smelling the singularity. The writing is on that big black Saturn cube called a quantum computer, and time is almost up. It's all a push straight into an eternal nightmare for a consciousness trapped in cyberspace. It's not all coincidence that the symbolism lines up, or the numbers, but in reality, every so-called expert has said that there is no way out of merging with machines. And when it all lines up, does it make sense that the end of the Bible reads the way it does? It is the end of humanity after a tipping point. We will lose control. But it made your life easier in the comfort of your own cocoon, at least until the body wasn't needed anymore. Remember who Venus really was represented by initially. Inanna, bloodthirsty, taloned night predator. Now she lives in D.C. and everywhere in the West and the world, and she loves a good lab rat. But maybe not half as much as Santa's elves, or Saturn itself.
I made a bargain with it. I made a bargain with it.
Run to Jesus, kids. These hellhounds are on everyone's trail now, and now you know what you're being saved from besides the obvious, saving your soul. Believe it or don't.
You sold your soul. You going down, all the way down. Hellhounds on your trail, boy. Hellhounds on your trail.
If I were a Jew, I'd be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.